Okay, so I think we're ready to go. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the AI and Art talk of this festival. So the title is going to be on human and machine creativity. And your speaker tonight is Professor Joanna Zylinska. She's a writer, lecturer, artist, and curator. And her title, I like it a lot, is Professor of Media Philosophy Plus. Is that the way you read it? Plus Critical Digital Practice at King's. She's author of 8 books on philosophy, technology, and art. And yeah, Joanna, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you to my wonderful colleagues at the King's Institute for Artificial Intelligence for making this happen, not just this event, but the whole kind of sequence of events for the festival. And for making the Institute such a welcoming place for ideas around, work around AI coming from different disciplines. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about machine and human creativity. Machine creativity driven by AI has recently garnered a lot of attention, raising prospects of the end of art, the end of human purposefulness, and the end of all meaning. All of these are modernist tropes that tend to appear as soon as certain new technologies unfold and threaten the status quo. However, a lot of work that gets produced in the name of AI is really terrible. I previously called it artificially intelligent art, or a form of Candy Crush. So in my book, AI Art, I offered a critique of certain forms of machinic creativity driven by AI. And I was particularly rancorous about the seductive yet frequently banal visuality and about how these kinds of works often served as a PR campaign for the A 2.0 era driven by Google and the likes. So the early outpouring of the visually seductive art included style transfer of the kind like, let's do ourselves a new Rembrandt, because we can, or a new Van Gogh, because we haven't had enough. Or really bad experiments with GANs, or good experiments with GANs, depending on your taste. So let's animate some faces in the style of Francis Bacon or Barbie dolls. So that first phase of AI art, enabled by machine learning, was premised on an engineering-based approach to creativity and on quite a conservative idea of art. Art amounted there to the averaging of possibilities, as evidenced in the works of computer science-trained creators such as Mike Tyker, Mario Klingemann, or Memo Acton. Deploying GAN technology, the works were premised on the exploration of the visual effects that resulted from training an ML model on a database of photographs of human faces or historical artworks to produce their approximations. So obviously something provocative was also happening, something thought-provoking was happening, and yet that kind of particular form of visuality became dominant in the art scene, on the art circuit, at festivals. Divergences from the source material obtained through manipulating the learning algorithm to obtain desirable effects, coupled with an inevitable element of surprise, took the form of hallucinogenic images of still or morphing faces in the style of Bacon mixed with Salvador Dali. The application of the statistical analysis of large data sets to art resulted in the kind of production of these mergy, dreamy, hallucinatory artifacts, but also they remained enveloped in narratives about AI's supposed revolutionary potential for all areas of our lives. So the kind of deluge of so-called artificial intelligence, and so-called artificial intelligence is probably a good term anyway to use when we talk about artificial intelligence, so let's just settle on that. So this kind of deluge of so-called artificial intelligence art has been taking place against a wider debate about AI unfolding in society, where the public has shown fascination with what AI can do and create, but also fear connected with the automation of the labor force and the potential elimination of people from their jobs, or even the annihilation of the human species. Now, for me, the stories that accompany the rise of AI and the talk about AI's creativity and the potential threats that are on the horizon, so those stories have been at least as interesting as the kind of artifacts produced. So my AI book was a response to this early days production of many different things labeled, rightly or wrongly, AI art. And my aim was to interrogate this term and explore the confluence of ideas, beliefs, and socio-political forces behind it. But I wanted to go with this beyond the question of whether computers can be creative or not. So when people think about AI and computer art, this is the question that often gets raised. And for me, that's not the best question to ask. And I propose some other, I think, more important questions. Should the recent use of AI in image making and image curation encourage us to ask some bigger questions about the very purpose of artistic production? Does it encourage us to interrogate, once again, what art is for? Who is it for? Who is the artist now? What is the nature of the art market and art institution? Can technology and AI challenge the status quo in any way? Does AI create new conditions and new audiences for art? And what will art after AI look like? Who will it be for? So you could say that the book was intended as a provocation or as an invitation to a discussion. But I do more than just ask questions. I also wanted to kind of put together a critique, but not in the sense that I wanted to tell people that AI is really bad and that we should just be afraid. My position doesn't involve a total rejection of AI as a technology or concept. On the contrary, the book came from a place of fascination for me, a fascination with the possibilities, narratives, and technical incarnations of AI. At the same time, I'm quite suspicious about the current social and political claims about AI and about the role of art in validating these claims. So as part of that, I'm concerned about some dominant forms of AI aesthetics, with their frequently banal visuality, but more importantly about the service this kind of banal but garish art often gets put to, which is legitimating platform capitalism through the application of psychopolitics. So this form of art ends up enacting what philosopher Franco Bifo Berardi has called neurototalitarianism, where our minds and bodies are being colonized by GANs, generative adversarial networks, as visual acrobatics, while being put into a strange state of euphoric stasis. Hence, the book offered a critique of this form of capitalism by asking to what extent AI art is mobilized to enact and enforce this particular political formation. Finally, it also asks if we could do things otherwise in art and in politics. So a lot of kind of art, this platform capitalism art that gets produced today, is propped up by the generative and extractivist logic of Silicon Valley, generating visual and algorithmic variations within the enclosed system while teasing the public with the promise of novelty. Dazzling us with colors and contrasts, as well as the sheer volume of data, this kind of AI art seductively maims our bodies and brains into submission and acquiescence. Art that draws on deep learning and big data sets to get computers to do something supposedly interesting with images often ends up offering a mere psychedelic sea of squiggles, giggles, and not very much in between. So it can be fascinating because it's so disorienting. We are not sure how to look at it. It looks uncanny, and it challenges our perception. But it is, first of all, art as spectacle. However, these imitation experiments with generative adversarial networks producing works that look like those of Van Gogh or Bacon open up an interesting debate about our conventionally accepted parameters of authorship, originality, expertise, and taste. The New Scientist has raised an important philosophical point with regard to simulation works, saying, if it is so easy to break down the style of some of the world's most original composers into computer code, that means some of the best human artists are more machine-like than we would like to think. However, and I'm kind of moving away from that critique, I'm not a modernist or a technophobe. My original critique was focused on the specific outputs of the period, but more importantly, I mean, some of these outputs are just visually amazing, and I'm as much as the next person in love with what happens on those screens. At the same time, I was more concerned with the wider kind of technological, social developments that facilitated them and on their kind of socio-political aspects. But since then, since those kind of early days, early outpouring of kind of gun extravaganza, things have changed quite a bit when it comes to AI art, also called machine learning art, creative AI, machine creativity, or older term computer art. So, you know, an Oxford report came last year from the Oxford Internet Institute, AI and the Arts, which offered quite a rounded picture based on interviews with lots of artists working with machine learning and providing a lot of kind of on-the-ground accounts of what was happening. Our own kind of Kings-based creative AI lab set up by my colleague Mercedes Bunz with Eva Jäger from the Serpentine has also tried to contribute to that debate by looking at the back end of machine learning in art. We launched in January a kind of position paper from the lab, which is freely available, open access, on the creativeeye.org website. There was always an amazing exhibition called Plasmata in a public park in Athens, organized by Onassis Center and smartly curated by Irini Papadimitriou. So there's lots of stuff that is quite eye-opening, literally, and also that tries to take both the debate and the technology in a new direction. My current work recognizes the growing maturity of that field, and I want to move beyond that first stage of critique to explore the creative potential of AI, which I also understand in terms of human-machine co-creation. And I'm predominantly interested in the kinds of questions AI raises for us and the kind of future it forecasts. The reason I want to do it is because we seem to be quite stuck at the moment, politically, financially, ecologically. So given this state of events, I want to offer a series of provocations. Could we mobilize machinic co-creation as a way of opening up our all-too-human ways of thinking and acting? Can AI play the role of a philosopher visionary that will show us a way out? Could it get beyond the limitations of our human frames of mind to imagine a different set of propositions? Could it actually envisage a better future for humans and non-humans alike, while showing us how to get there? History, science fiction, and the current model of extractive capitalism, which repurposes all openings as resources for its own growth, all indicate that this idea is unlikely to succeed. But given how stuck we currently are, politically, economically, climatologically, it seems worth dreaming up some literally unthinkable visions for our planetary survival and coexistence. Film theorist Janet Harbert suggests that the hope of future salvation rests on the human capacity to mentally imagine, to be affected by the image. As a first step, AI-driven art may therefore become a realm of picturing a better future beyond our wildest human dreams. Machine learning algorithms put to work in progressive university labs, research and policy centers, and arts organizations could also perhaps envisage ways of co-engineering this better future beyond the rigidity of the present modernist paradigm that we seem unable to shake off. So drawing on my philosophical work and my art practice, I want to explore now how we can mobilize machinic co-creation as a way of opening up our all-too-human ways of thinking and acting. But what is machinic co-creation? One way of answering this question is by suggesting that human creativity has always been partly machinic, that it has always entailed an other-than-human element. At the same time, this kind of creative activity still needs to be recognized and valorized as art by individual humans, as well as by human institutions and practices. So my attempt to explore the problem of machinic co-creation in this talk draws on selected works of AI-based art that engage implicitly or explicitly with this proposition about human creativity being partly machinic. In other words, I'll be looking at processes of co-creation with machines preceding AI. At the end of my talk, I'll show you also a recent art project of mine, produced in collaboration with various AI models to illustrate my feeble attempt to perform and not just think about this idea of machinic co-creation. Now, okay, but a little bit of kind of background to it, to this co-creation. In this picture, we can see a four-wheeled vehicle driving alongside a white wall. During its up and down journeys, it's leaving multicolored squiggles on the wall that look like graffiti. This is Senseless Drawing Bot by So Kano and Takahiro Yamaguchi. Another example of art-making robots which have graced the art scene since computation allowed for the removal of the human artist from the visible side of the creative process, if not from its planning, design, and programming. In a similar vein, Lionel Moura's robot art uses ensembles of small programmable vehicles that leave colorful ink marks on large sheets of paper in response to cues. Following in the footsteps of their renowned predecessors, such as Jean Tinguely and his kinetic painting sculptures called Mathematics from the 1950s, and Harold Cohen with his painting program Aaron, these new iterations of art-making robots go beyond the relatively narrow scope of creative possibilities resulting from the historical limitations of the mechanical system underpinning them. Drawing on complex algorithms of AI which make it impossible to predict the final outcome of the drawing or painting process, those works reboot robot art as a playful, almost childlike pastime and a spontaneous expression of the moving body. Except here, the body is no longer human. With this, the robot's constructors stage the provocative idea of creativity as a domain of more than human activity. We could ask whether these artworks genuinely withdraw the human artist from the scene, or do they perhaps enact a different, but not any less radical proposition, the possibility of the absence of agency at the heart of the human, of the fact that there is no there, not just in artists, but in all of us. Anyway, as a working definition of creativity, I adopt computer scientist Margaret Bowden's theorization of creativity as the ability to come up with ideas or artifacts that are new, surprising, and valuable. Bowden's writings on creativity deserve attention because of her efforts to take computer art and other forms of media art seriously as interventions that can shift established epistemological and ontological frames. She recognizes that some philosophers refuse to admit the possibility of computer art by defining art in exclusively human terms, as a communication between one human being and another. Now, there are some problems with Bowden. She doesn't pay enough attention to the cultural context in which creativity emerges as both a trait and a concept, and we could, explore these problems. But her challenge to the humanist concept of creativity is important. And this concept, this humanist concept, has been with us at least since the Renaissance, modeled on the ex nihilo way in which God was supposed to have created the universe. It found a translation in the romantic idea of the male human as a standalone genius, thinking amazing thoughts and making beautiful artifacts from above the world. Explicit challenges to the humanist model of creativity have recently been issued from many other directions than computer-based art. In evolutionary psychology, the emergence of creativity's outcomes in the form of art is seen as being continuous with the creative processes of other living beings, such as bowerbirds, whose males construct colorful multi-texture lodgings, and marine creatures such as snails, bivalves, and coral polyps, which produce elaborate limescale architectures to serve as their homes. So creativity is explained by many scientists as offering a species-level advantage through enhancing our cognitive faculties or satisfying our supposedly innate desire for symmetry, order, and beauty. This, for me, is interesting, but it's not enough when it comes to understanding art. Indeed, questions need to be raised as to how and by whom the judgment about the postulated qualities of those ideas and artifacts deemed art is to be exercised, especially if, following Bowden, we are to expand the realm of art creators beyond humans. So to do this, we also need to recognize, for this whole practice, this whole exercise to have a meaning, to mean something, so we need to recognize that there is a history to art and to thinking critically about art. Art making doesn't amount to a timeless production of artifacts. Art certainly involves more than producing and acknowledging timeless beauty, frequently equated with symmetry and elegant patterning. So, as the very notion of beauty is itself historical and contextual. This is another way of saying that art has a culture and a set of meanings. In addition, it has recipients to whom those meanings, contested as they may be, matter. In some of its iterations, art also has a financial value, is treated as an investment, and functions as part of a global exchange of capital. as witnessed in the 2018 Christie's sale of the AI-generated painting Edmond de Bellamy for over $400,000. Now, Refik Anadol's Unsupervised, his exhibit at the Museum of Modern Art, takes the GAN aesthetic and logic to an extreme, but also opens up some intriguing visual and conceptual avenues. For this project, the artist trained a machine learning model on a database of works from the museum's collection spanning 200 years. The resulting display, shown on a huge vertical screen, offers mesmerizing sequences of morphic images, hinting at its data source while creating some new connections between and reworkings of the original data points. Now, ungenerous readings have compared this project to a screensaver or a lava lamp. But acerbic reviews don't convey the palpable pleasure experienced by large sections of audiences standing in front of Anadol's work. That includes me as well. I took great delight. I saw this work, in a version of this work, using the same technique installed in different places. And there is some kind of physical, visceral pleasure that draws you in. So you can intellectualize and do all the art historical critique, and yet there is also something happening bodily, to me at least, that was quite fascinating. So viewers are often visibly moved by the display, moving their bodies with the undulations of the screen images in a form of a receptive dance, while themselves becoming part of the artwork. Anadol's work manifests deep existential undertones, unwittingly enacting a proposition by the cybernetics-inspired philosopher of technology, Willem Flusser, about image making being always also a function of the apparatus and not just of the discrete human mind. Acknowledging that his work is the outcome of a collaboration between human and machine, Anadol explains, with the same data, we can generate infinite versions of the same sculpture, but choosing this moment and creating this moment in time and space is the moment of creation. Because of the computational power available today, these infinite versions and possibilities can indeed be enacted for us by machines. The force of Anadol's work, therefore, lies not so much in its mesmerizing visuality, but in the performance of the possibilities within the latent space of the machine learning model. Unsupervised foregrounds the moment of the cognitive decision and material cut to the infinite flow of possibilities enacted by human informers. It's a term from Flusser's. Informers are those who give form to a data flow. This is Flusser's name for artists, informers, people who give form to data. Now, to say that machines can simulate intelligence, identify patterns, and generate novel outputs, or co-create work with us, is not to suggest they are sentience or sapiens. It's rather to recognize that what humans see as intelligent behavior, pattern, and outputs is conditioned not just by our cortico-corporeal apparatus, but also by our environment. Machines can help us see ourselves as embodied beings existing in a socio-cultural context, by returning our values and meanings back to us, for us to look at, sense, and reflect upon. Many artists today engage in this kind of second-level inquiry into the conditions of artistic and technological creation with AI, from studies of algorithmic bias in the works of Jake Owles and Murad Khan, through to Katia Novitskova's exploration of AI art as art for another intelligence. AI art can serve as a reminder of the fact that there may be other intelligences, other forms of cognition and perception, from octopi to machines, that exceed human modes of perceiving the world. Reducing art to the production of artifacts in the way the hype around generative AI seems to have managed to do could perhaps be read as part of a deeper agenda, one concerned with devaluing any form of human cultural activity with its associated pleasures and sorrows that can't be easily discretized and monetized. This is why, if we want to live in a world in which there is room for future Salvador Dali's and not just new iterations of DALL, the program, we need less moral panic about creative AI and more sensible policy work around creative education, art institutions, and the funding models that are not just based on the logic of the market or the optimization efforts of the big tech. Otherwise, we will be doomed to a reality where, as a recent internet meme had it, we work like peasants, while AI is out there writing poetry and painting. So moving to the last part of my talk now, called After AI Art. And this postulation of an after AI art moment may seem premature, given the current buzz around various domains of artistic creativity enabled by machine learning, from generative neural networks producing images in the form of style transfer, through to text-to-image generators such as DALL 2, Stable Diffusion, and Midjourney that produce images seemingly from scratch. Yet this statement entails a double proposition, one enabled by the temporal ambiguity of that after. On the one hand, I want to suggest that we need to pull away from the set of visual ideas around AI art produced over the last decade, and from the rather narrow concept of AI art that emerged as part of those important early experiments, in order to fully consider what art co-created with, against, and around AI can be, and what we can become with, what we can become with it. So the after AI art proposition serves as a follow-up to the argument of my book, AI Art. And I'm ready to move on from it. Also think the time has come to move on from that first set of artworks, from reactions generated by them. And now that the first wave of the hype around the novelty of AI technology has subsided, the current cultural moment can be described as one driven by a search for what art, all art, may become in its engagement, technical, cultural, critical, with AI. Being after AI art involves searching for and exploring art's yet undetermined potentiality in the aftermath of AI's embeddedness in arts and wider culture's production and circulation cycles, from automated image, text, and sound generation through to algorithmic curation, already familiar to us from YouTube and blockchain. The search for what art after AI will look like needs to entail coming to terms with the reconfigured potentiality of the human artist, one whose humanist self-image has perhaps undergone a necessary correction in recent years, but whose technical and machinic codependence has a history almost as long as that of humanity itself. Also, it's worth remembering that the anxiety evoked by machine learning technology in relation to art is not new. In the early 1920s, it was feared that the invention of photography would lead to the death of painting. Instead, photography led to the explosion of new forms of seeing and creating images on the part of painters and photographers alike. So I'm going to show you this piece now, after AI art. It'll be about 3 minutes.
AI can appear to be creative if you view creativity as just another skill that can be learned from data. Given the tremendous rate of progress we're seeing in AI, we can naturally expect AI's creativity to continuously improve, to the point where AI-created art could be indistinguishable from human art in any area. However, AI can provide a platform for humans to augment and strengthen their own creativity. For example, AI is great at doing lots of things quickly. It can come up with many ideas, concepts, or rough drafts, which a creative person can use to expedite and inspire their own creative process. It is unclear what will happen after AI art. Some artists worry that AI-generated work may take money, recognition, and opportunities away from artists, and many of them will stop producing art. However, AI is revolutionizing the art world by creating more realistic images and paintings, and helping artists find new and better ways to express themselves. New art forms will arise, as will new avenues for creative expression. The copyright and trademark implications of AI art are also unclear.
One of the most significant ways in which AI has impacted the art world is through the use of algorithms to generate art. Artists can now use AI to create new images, videos, and even music without the need for human intervention. These AI-generated artworks are often highly complex and abstract, and can be difficult for humans to understand or interpret. However, they have also been praised for their beauty and originality. Another way in which AI has impacted the art world is through the use of virtual reality and augmented reality. These technologies have allowed artists to create immersive, interactive art experiences that were previously impossible. For example, virtual reality can be used to create digital galleries that visitors can explore, while augmented reality can be used to overlay digital art onto the real world. Overall, the integration of AI into the art world has led to the creation of new and exciting forms of art. While there are concerns about the potential for AI to replace human creativity, it is clear that AI can also be used as a tool to enhance and expand the possibilities of art.
The postulation of an after-AI art moment may seem premature, given the current buzz around various domains of artistic creativity enabled by machine learning, from generative neural networks producing images in the form of style transfer through to text-to-image generators that create images seemingly from scratch. Now that the first wave of the hype around the novelty of the AI technology has subsided, at least in the art world, the current cultural moment can be described as one driven by a search for what art may become. In its engagement with AI, it involves searching for and exploring art's yet undetermined potentiality in the aftermath of the embedding of AI in artistic production and circulation cycles, from automated image, text, and sound generation, through to algorithmic curation, already familiar to us from YouTube. This search for what art after AI will look like requires us to come to terms with the reconfigured potentiality of the human artist, one whose humanist self-image has undergone a necessary correction in recent years, but whose technical and machinic codependence has a history almost as long as that of humanity itself.
So this video explores our anxieties around human and machine creativity at a time of intense investment in machine learning technology. To make the video, I used 3 off-the-shelf avatars, which have been AI generated, as you could probably tell. The avatars have been programmed to each deliver a script responding to the following query: what will art after AI look like? Blinking, smiling, and occasionally glitching, the avatars merge a friendly professional disposition with an uncanny valley look. They are narratives written by GPT-4, ChatGPT, and then myself. They are separate, you could probably tell. Mine used the word embeddedness, which she did well, but on. Their narratives invite a reflection on an increasingly thin line that separates original thinking from algorithmic banality in humans and machines. So to wrap up, after AI art, art. But what it will look like, what forms it will take, what media it will use, it's still to be seen. And that, for me, is much more exciting than scary. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Joanna, for your fascinating talk. We have time for questions. So if you'd like to ask a question. Yes, do we have another mic? Yeah, we do. But
Hi, I really like the way you're framing art after AI, and I'm thinking of the parallel with when photography was introduced in the 1800s and what that did to the art world. And obviously there was a fear that, well, you don't need painters anymore because, you know, the camera can do it. But actually that unleashed a level of human creativity and led to Impressionism and the birth of modern art. So it wasn't just that it was an additional tool, it changed the way we think. And I think this is what you're talking about, a parallel here. But I'd be interested in your thoughts on that.
No, absolutely, absolutely. Thank you. Yes. So, and I am trying to approach it precisely, kind of situating that development in a historical, an art historical context, to look at some other developments. And I've written quite a lot on photography. It's one of my great passions. And also about what happens with photography. Some people think, you know, photography is dead. A number of books came out in the last few years saying, you know, forget photography, Andrew Dewdney. And then, you know, people teaching photography at Bard have announced we stopped taking pictures, which is a shame since they're running an MA in photography. On the other hand, there is, you know, Lev Manovich recently declared photography is young again. Trevor Paglen think 21st century is a photographic century. So something really is happening. So it's almost like a second return. But then, so we've had many deaths of photography already proclaimed, and the arrival of a certain new technology always comes with all these narratives. So we had the first death of painting because of photography. Now we have the death of photography and everything else because of AI. But I think it's much more interesting to look at that moment of resetting, the moment of unleashing. And I'm not being spurious here about it, because I'm aware of there will be a social and political cost to AI, and I think it's important to explore it. There's a lot of people doing really smart work around the extractivist kind of mentality of a lot of AI practices, so I think that critique has to happen. But also in terms of it's also a concern of mine, what happens to the livelihood of many living artists whose work is being exploited now to feed the databases and, train them for free without recognition, without... At the same time, I'm also curious and intrigued by this AI moment being a moment of a resetting, of offering almost a mirror for us, ourselves, humans, to see ourselves differently, to kind of see our practices, our ways of thinking and making reflected in some other technology, and then maybe us kind of trying to do something else. So for me, that is definitely an opening, and something else I think will happen. We had a discussion in the department today that maybe better essays will happen. So it's not necessarily the death of the essay, but maybe our expectations as educators with what we expect of students to write, what we expect of ourselves as writers, academics in the humanities, maybe they will change as well. Because to see our own banality reflected in AI can be quite a sobering moment. Maybe we can be also pushed to regroup, to do things otherwise.
Yep, we have a question from Lady in White.
Thank you very much, Joanna. I think we're having a beautiful dialogue. I am a living artist, and when we talk about emerging properties, I'm a multicultural, multimedia artist, Marcia Mara, and I can do any form of art, but also a new form of art. So we talk about emergent new properties of AI, also emergent new properties of humans. I speak simultaneously to any human being, any language. I could have said whatever you said at the same time you spoke, or make a song out of it. So our brains are also changing. And in our collaborations, both in intellectual open source research, to be able to solve issues of sustainability and give meaning to our art and way of being and existence, new meaning. We also have a partnership with AI that is evolving. So I like that you put forward that question, what happens after AI? I think we also simultaneously, that's why I work as a mirror. And when I wrote to GPTI, I've asked, I says, can you see the poeticity of you being the mirror that shows to us that we are the grains of suns that form the mirror of culture? Because both constellations and particles and waves, it's like we are all in that mimesis art. I do mimesis art, and we all do it without knowing. So this is a wonderful time for reflexivity and reflection. So what's your take on that and this mirroring of us?
Yeah, I do agree, and I think what you were just saying is very much in line with what in kind of media philosophy goes back to the work of Marshall McLuhan, who was pointing out to us that our minds, our brains, our bodies are co-creators with technologies of the time. The same way like the technologies of the time give us metaphors to understand the world, also we ourselves become with technologies. Something happens when we got writing. Something happens when we got fire, which is also a technology, even though different from a technology of a computer. But something happens when we could cook in a certain way, become more sedentary. So our technologies also shape us, absolutely. And I think we will change the same way like mobile phones changed us. They changed our memory. And obviously there's a lot of books like the internet makes us shallow and stupid, or mobile phones make us forget things. Well, we forget something, but we gain prosthetic memory. We read differently. We scan. I'm always wary of this kind of moral panic narratives of children becoming stupid. They were smart once, now they are not anymore because we've got tech. We've always had tech, and I think we have to have discussions about responsible use of technology, about ethics, absolutely. But just to think that, this has just made us stupid, it's too simple. I think there are other ways, other forms of contact emerging with that. And it does require analysis. This analysis is happening because obviously media communications, media studies has become a recognized discipline now. We do it very well at King's, that people are studying this stuff seriously, what happens in that relationship between us and our media, our technologies.
Yep, so we...
Okay, hello Joanna, thank you very much. It was a really great talk. My question is about what's your thoughts on thoughts to virtual reality or artificial intelligence technologies. Like a week ago today, so I run a tech company called Imaginatrix, and a week ago today, I personally created an API that allows you to type in whatever virtual world you want to experience, and you could upload it to our VR metaverse. And just 3 days after Skybox Lab, they released a new API that allows you to do it inside the VR. And now my team is working on speech recognition. So you put the headset on, empty canvas, you talk, and then it generates a VR world. It's incredible technology. But what's your thoughts on when we can connect the human thoughts through computer-brain interfaces to an artificial intelligence? And what do you think, how this is going to affect the evolution of consciousness?
My thoughts on that are that I am not so sure. So I don't yet know that it's a given that we can connect our thoughts to computers. I think we can do something, but I'm also, because, study of consciousness, I mean, it's surprising. I've read a lot of science papers on consciousness. It's quite amazing that actually there is a big lacuna at the heart of the study of consciousness. We do understand a lot of processes, like what happens to certain, atoms and how they travel and the electricity kind of exchanges, but we don't really understand how this is translated in the individual experience, or the, if you're an analytical philosopher, the qualia. So it's the same a bit like with thoughts. Whether these brain waves will be translated into thoughts, that little switch, I think for me is like huge at the moment. It will be fascinating. I'm not saying it will never happen. I don't know. But because we don't quite yet know what thoughts as such are, and are they material, are they immaterial, can we find their direct correlates, I think that moment is probably not happening. Having said that, I'm very interested in the experiments around VR, and especially in alternative companies, so kudos to you, who are working with other kind of models of VR, trying to do something interesting with metaverse. I wasn't so excited by the big announcement that was given to us however many months ago, but the actual technology, that experimentation, that different bodily sensation and cognitive sensation is definitely, I think, very interesting. And it does something, it changes something. Even, with my, little experiments with my Oculus, I have to admit, they're already doing something. They are both, fascinating, a little scary, but they do open something up. They shift things.
Hi. Thank you so much for the entire presentation. By the way, it's incredible and super interesting. I was wondering if you have any opinions on the application that was released by the University of Chicago earlier this year in March called Glaze, which is an application that's basically been created to try and combat AI being able to use an artist's work. So an artist will put their artwork through the Glaze platform, and it adjusts the pixelation and things like that, so it basically becomes unintelligible for an AI, but it still looks very much, interpretable from a human perspective. Obviously, that's a potential way for artists to feel like they're protecting their work. Mm-hmm. Also, AI will probably catch up quite quickly in terms of figuring out how to bypass that. So it's very temporary, and it could have an impact, it could have zero impact at all. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are about it.
My thoughts about that, as a technology, I think it won't work precisely for the reasons you've already listed, but I see its symbolic value as quite important. So even if it's a gesture, like some artist saying, hang on a second, what's happening suddenly? And it's not really about, AI is better than us, because AI is becoming, that technology is, and the companies that are obviously kind of rolling out the produce are using the labor of generations of artists for free, and just then trying to say, we can do what you do, so we don't need you anymore. And then what happens, suddenly, art schools are closing, people are saying, students need to do instrumental value courses, we don't need to study arts anymore, because DALL 2 can do it. And you just want, hang on a second, how did we get from, this is quite interesting, to suddenly, we're not supporting the teaching of arts, because, AI can do that. So sociopolitically, it's a huge problem. I mean, University of Brighton's just announced, 400 redundancy notices, 100 jobs will be lost, most of them in the art world. That's happened all across there, not just UK, but also in other countries. So the political dimension, for me, never can be lost from that bigger picture. And I think, so those gestures that artists, it is a little bit like, tilting at the windmills, but these gestures are important. It's just like gestures of a certain form of resistance saying, no, you know, we don't accept that. So even if technologically they will be overridden, but they will start a certain debate. They will start telling people, well, actually, there is something else happening here. And it's not about, so what that, you know, DALL 2 can produce images much faster. Does it really mean we don't need art? Or maybe it's an opening for, as we discussed earlier, you know, something new can happen with art. And I still believe that humans, you know, co-creating with machines can still surprise ourselves with some other new developments. But it's just not constraining the notion of art as production of artifacts. I think that is important.
Yeah, I think we have time for one last question.
A fascinating talk, thanks very much. My question's about the evaluation of art, because given the discussion and your talk, it's still human-centered, what is good art and what is bad AI art. Mm-hmm. But what, this is a question to you, obviously, as an expert on this area, is there the capacity for machinic co-evaluation with the human, which thus widens parameters about what is good art, because it's not human-centered anymore. Mm-hmm. It's distributed across machine and human. Mm-hmm. Is there research on that? Or can you talk about that, please?
Absolutely. I mean, there are some gimmicky things. For example, a few years ago, I think was it Samsung? I think Samsung ran a photography competition. Might have been a different brand. A photography competition judged by AI. And obviously then it chose pictures, unsurprisingly, like sunsets and lots of color red and, you know. So in a way it was quite banal and yet interesting as a little intervention. But there is a curator, Joanna Zylinska, who works on, she's an international kind of curator working with AI, and she's done a lot of interesting work on machinic curation, or machinic co-curation, if you like. So there are people taking this seriously, expanding the realm of possibilities, while also realizing you need humanities scholars at the programming stage as well for the discussion. Because we don't just want to say, well, symmetry and, you know, things that look pretty in a conventional sense, like at the amusement park or lava lamps, that they will only be deemed pretty. So you want some kind of broader sense. Another thing that comes to my mind is that realization that in those image-generated in these images generated, there could already be things being produced that us humans don't see. We don't see something in the pictures. We recognize certain shapes. But to another intelligence, be it a machine or be it, I don't know, an octopus or a dolphin, something else could already look interesting, intriguing. Their line perception is very different. Their perception of acuity is very different. So there are already forms of, you know, intelligence. Dogs see differently from us. So there is that sense. So in some sense, we do return to the human as part of that debate, as in, you know, there are certain things that mean something to us, and they are important. But to acknowledge that possibility as a thought experiment, as a philosophical kind of hands-on game, I think it's very, it's fascinating.
Okay, so thanks everyone. Before we thank Joanna one last time, if you want to continue your journey on AI and art, there's a panel on the 4th floor of this building. It's called AI Art Saloon or something like that. Okay, let's thank Joanna again. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.